Welcome to the Metta Performance Podcast, where we explore how compassion, high achievement, and human connection come together in work, sport, and life. Today, we welcome you to our first episode where we introduce the team here at Metta and share why we're starting this podcast and talk about what listeners can expect. I'm so glad you're here. I am Holly Benner. I am a organizational psychologist by education and a former professional triathlete, current runner and lover of all things endurance, and I'm joined by my amazing co-hosts Michael Seiler and Sean Lugens to share what we're about. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michael.
Thank you, Holly. As Holly said, I'm Michael Seiler. Up until about a year and a half ago, I spent 25 plus years in healthcare before taking retirement about a year and a half ago, which has allowed me to really focus on what I love to do, which is work with athletes and people looking to improve their performance, whether that's in work, sport, or life. And really looking forward to this podcast. Sean?
So I'm Sean Lugens. I am a development nerd, I guess, and SaaS software business person by day. I've been a triathlete, I don't know if I dare say, 30 plus years, 35, 37 years, cycling, ultra running, stuff like that. And I think the whole work-life balance thing is really important to me. And started coaching years ago, and actually all this started with Michael. We met riding, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, I was. To be fair, I was probably drafting and sucking wheel a lot, and probably that's how I talked to Michael. So.
Nice. And Michael and I met way back in, 8 years ago, maybe now, at Iron Mill, Louisville.
Yeah. You were a homestay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I did not know that, actually. I
stayed in Michael's basement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prepping for the race.
We actually, Marcia and I introduced Holly and Matt to Manhattan.
That's right. Yes, Marcia took us shopping.
After.
For proper ingredients, which was amazing.
Speaking of performance, just want to get the order right. As we talk about performance, there are some important order of operations.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Got to take you can take it serious and not take yourself so seriously. It's got to be a balance, which is really kind of what Metta is about, is sustainable performance. It's how to go against the hustle-only narrative and really focus on how you can be your best in all aspects of life in a way that you can maintain.
Yeah. Well, which is going back to when Holly and I started Metta Performance. It's coming up on 3 years, hard to believe. Mm-hmm. It has flown by, but I mean, we settled on the word metta because it means loving kindness, and that really starts with taking care of yourself. And unfortunately, our culture tends to reward, or at least feels like it rewards, those type A plus people who are hustling all the time. And we've seen it. It's a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for unsustainable performance. Yes, you might get to a peak, but it's not something you can sustain over the long haul. And that's really what we focus on with the people we work with, is how do we help you balance all those things that are going on in your life, whether it's I want to do well in sport, but I also have this demanding career and I've got a home life, and I have to balance all these. And sometimes it means taking a little back seat at work to do this thing, and then that goes away. And so how do we help you balance all that? But it starts with taking care of yourself to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, again, more of the origin. We're all coaches here. So Sean, myself, Michael, we're all coaches of sport, first and foremost. Obviously, from our intro, we love sport. We live and breathe this. This is what we do actively currently. And we are coaches of performance. I'm a ICF accredited leadership and performance coach. Michael is a enlifted coach. Sean maybe will share some curriculum to expand your coaching cadre, but we really love working with people as coaches. We all take the role very seriously, and we noticed over time that the people that we work with as athletic clients are high achievers. I call them type A plus. They want to get after it in all aspects of life. They want to run a marathon and run their business and have a great relationship and be balanced and do all the things. So we really created Metta as this theme, this brand, as a way to recognize the people, the type A plus people that we love to work with, because it's hard, right? Life is really challenging. We want to get a lot out of it. And we love working with people that want to live a big, full life, but also save them from themselves, right? And we've all learned the hard way. So maintaining that sustainable balance, it doesn't have to come at a cost that maybe you're familiar with or that you've seen other people. You don't have to choose to either be a high performing business executive or, a really successful athlete. There is space for and.
And I think for me, the biggest thing is on that is, defining A plus, because I think people get tied up with it's type A plus. It doesn't mean, you have to be a CEO or you have to be whatever. It's how do I manage all the things I actually want to do? A plus for me is I want to do these things and not crush myself. And so that to me is kind of the embodiment of the Metta, and why I was so interested in partaking in this is how do we learn lessons from people across the spectrum who are trying to balance, work and life and try to do some other cool stuff, the whole do epic shit thing on the side. And epic can be anything from getting out and moving and doing your first race, doesn't matter what you do, to you don't have to be a podium chaser to be a type A plus. And so I think there's lessons to be learned from all of those. Specifically, actually, weirdly, the people that are, kind of learning and getting there, it's always refreshing to me to see people who kind of get that balance right, and they're so stoked to just finish a race. Meanwhile, you're really upset. You're like, I can't believe I didn't podium or whatever. And there's just huge perspective around your mental well-being that comes from that kind of the meta side of I need to be enjoying this part of life. This is a wellness thing, and that's just part of the journey. So that's why I was so excited to have this kind of cadre of guests that we're going to come across, a wide variety of different people who are tackling this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about the type A plus is we typically then think of someone who's a CEO of a company or has, run in the Olympics. But really, for me, the people that I enjoy working with are the type A plus who just want to be the best version of themselves on the day, whatever that is, whether that's setting a PR or completing their first marathon or getting that new job, whatever that thing is just being the best they can be each day, and whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sean, I love what you said about, type A plus people, it's not outcome focused. And I often say to the clients and individuals I work with that the outcome's never guaranteed. There's so many variables that we can't control, but the experience matters. Yeah. And how we love to work with people and what we hope to share by the stories that we're going to, give a platform to here is really how to create that experience that's meaningful and how to explore how self-awareness and compassion can be that fuel for sustained success.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And for me, it's interesting. I know I've done the process well when I want to send thank yous before the event. That's how I typically know, I'm getting there the best possible way I can be. To your point, I can't control outcome. I can't control who else is there. I can't control, if you have a chronic condition, I can't control that day. It's not all in my hand, but I controlled the process with all the different things that I had going on in life. That's how I know, I've got good balance going for myself in life when I'm kind of just stoked to be there and, first or last, I'm good with how that goes because I did the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. As we think about this podcast, and we've had conversations about it, I guess, who are some of the, topics that you're looking forward to covering? If you don't have names yet, what are the types of conversations each of you are hoping to have?
Well, I'll go first. I think there's a couple. I think we mentioned I am super stoked to actually talk to you and your daughter. And just so people don't think that's creepy, Michael's daughter is, finished school and is a professional cyclist over in Europe for the summer. My daughter is slightly older and tackling her first fondo next summer and did her first long race. And you coached her And so I'm very curious because she's asking me to coach. So I'm very curious to like learn from you two how that goes, because that truly is kind of these dynamics going on. And of course, she did that while she was in school and finishing school and doing stuff. And then there are a couple folks that I think are, have careers and kids and are performing at different things, from high rocks to triathlon to stuff. And how do they balance and make that work? Because I think the give and take is, you have a plan. We all know you have a plan. And some of us on here are type A. I won't mention any names. And so you have a plan, and then that plan changes. And how do you adapt to that plan? Because there's just a lot of life going on. And so I think we've got ex-professional triathletes that are business to CEOs who are doing cool stuff. I think that's, for me, just how they stay so happy over the long haul.
Yeah, that's what, bouncing off of that, I'm looking forward to hearing those conversations and tapping into individuals that I would say have lots of hats on the hat rack. And by that, I mean lots of identities. And these are individuals that, again, live a big life. And I think they really raise the bar on potential and what's possible. I grew up with the narrative of you kind of have to pick and choose, because there's no way you could do this and that and the other thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing that people that I've been honored enough to meet, they raise the bar, man. My clients, the people that I've had the honor of coaching, they really teach me what's possible, because they are getting after it in all aspects of work, sport, and life. And they're doing it in a way where they're happy, they're healthy, they're successful, they're dynamic. And these are stories that need to be told, because it's truly, when we are able to learn from other people and learn from our peers and our colleagues about what is possible, it raises our bar. And if we help each other get better and see what's possible, and then truly get the practical insights, like ideally, not only do I want to give these individuals a platform to tell their story, but to teach us, how did they do it? What is a tool or a skill we can put in our back pocket so that listeners have something they can put into practice right away? And, I often use sports analogies when I coach, and I always say sets and reps, right? So like, how can we learn from our guests to put something into the mind gym, into the actual gym, and get some sets and reps so that we can all get better together?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and just to kind of close the loop on this, I think just hoping that people who do tune into the podcast will hear something from someone that says, oh my gosh, I've been having the same issue or whatever. It's great to see a potential solution, something that they can take home and either implement or try and see if it works. Because, we can all learn from each other. And you're right, all the people I work with, I'm constantly amazed with all the things they're juggling, and still finding, time to do it all and stay healthy and happy. So I'm looking forward to those types of conversations.
Such a good point, Michael, around how they deal with it, because I think social media in particular, everyone talks about great sets, great sessions, great outcomes, but we all know, like, when you're doing all that stuff, like, there are bad reps, there are bad sets, and how do you work, and we always talk about how you deal with that, and you might track it and you put the notes in, but there's the mental aspect, and how do you have a bad morning run and then go have a good day at work and go do like that part of the mindfulness piece. And I think how people cope and deal with that is going to be really cool to see, how you keep positive across or how you switch gears.
It's a great call out. It's not just about when things go right, but when things go wrong, because that happens, I would say, more than things go right. It's making me think of Michael Jordan, how he's missed more shots than he ever made, but he's known as the most winningest basketball player, arguably, of all time. And it's those stories that learning and listening to people that maybe have platforms or prestige, but getting behind the curtain a little bit and learning about how they overcome or overcame their failures and their potential setbacks to learn from it. And again, have that learning moment together and have a platform to hear those stories.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think it's a good segue to talk about a time that...
Hey, this is William Tinka. Listen, we did a series for iSolved called Heroes of HR, where we talk to HR practitioners. And these are just your run-of-the-mill, everyday slogging it out, 300 employees in Cedar Rapids, HR pros. Mostly it's centered around iSolved and what they do with iSolved, but also they talk a lot about kind of the day-to-day rigor of HR. If you're curious about that, search for Heroes of HR wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
You maybe didn't embody the Metta method. So, we're at this point where we're sharing our brand with people, and our audience, our listeners are really lucky because they don't just get one of us, they have three of us to listen to, which I think is really helpful because, when I wanted to start Metta Performance and when I thought about my own performance, what I need to perform at my best, I knew it wasn't alone. I'm very collaborative. I love working with the team. I love the team that we have at Metta because it's not just me. So the collective is stronger than the individual, and all of our networks and our experiences combine to bring even more stories and to create even more richness to what we're going to be bringing you all as listeners. So I'd love to know a time that you just got this wrong, when knowing what we know about Metta and how we work together, that you didn't take a compassionate course of action, or you beat yourself up more than you needed to, and kind of what the outcome was.
Oh, who wants to admit? I'll admit failure first while you're thinking.
Okay.
So actually, I was in Louisville at the time, living in Louisville, and they didn't have an Ironman then. So they had Wisconsin, and I'd been out to Hawaii a couple of times, and in theory, was never going to go back because I'm always done, but it can be a little like crack. Like I want to play with the big kids, and so I dumped all my eggs into Ironman Wisconsin one year, and it became work, and the process became not fun. Everything was not fun. I was so hell-bent on the output, the outcome. Mm-hmm. And went up there and got strep throat right before, raced, ended up in the ambulance because, it was kind of like Kona or hospital was my mentality. And so obviously one of those outcomes did happen. Like that was my mentality to make sure you don't stop and push through. I didn't realize that was an actual thing. And I was really down because like my identity that year was built around that. It wasn't about my mental wellness or enjoying being out or enjoying riding, enjoying it. Everything was very scripted. Everything was based. And then of course the outcome didn't happen. And it took me a while to get my head right. And actually the positive out of it was a guy in Louisville was like, well, just don't do that. Why don't you sign up? This will say a lot or make people concerned. Why don't you sign up and run a 100-mile trail race? Because no one knows who you are. There's no pressure on how you do. And literally he's like, success is like finishing and not dying, like low bar. And I ended up training and truly enjoying being out again. Like it was the most time I spent in the woods. As anyone who does trail running goes, times don't matter. Like you think you're running all this time on the road and it's very scripted, right? Maybe some stuff, but out in the woods, like so many variables. And I just loved being outside again. And so since then I've matriculated between sports, but I will not let myself get to that place again where I get so wound up and missing out on just enjoying being out and I would say getting off script. So we live in New England, and so like it might be a run day or it might be a swim day, but it's 65 and foliage is out. I'm like I'm running or riding or I'm changing how long I'm going to be out. But that to me was kind of the non-Metta moment that kind of transformed and kind of helped me keep going over the long haul. And I'll leave it with, I tell people now, due to that, you can always be miserable at work. And so definitely when you play, you should have fun. You can always find more misery at work. Even if your work job's great, I'm sure you can go find some more work to be miserable. And so you got to make sure this stuff is fun along the path and it's good for you mentally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would think, thank you for going first because it did give me a time to search the memory bank. I recall that I got so hung up on wanting to qualify for the Boston Marathon, and I think it was the year I ran Chicago, which is coming up this weekend, and literally was on pace till 5K to go, and you've never seen anybody just tank. And there was another marathon, so I didn't do it. There was another marathon in December, So this was in October to December, and I was like, well, I've got all this great fitness. I'll go do that marathon. And I went down and from the first step, hated every moment of it. And ended up pulling my sister she had driven up, and she was at about I don't even think it was the halfway point, but she was there just to cheer. And I just stopped at the car and got in. She's like, what's going on? I was like, I'm done. And similarly, I had put so much into hitting the goal, the outcome, that, it really messed with how I thought about me as a runner, how I thought about running. And even though I grew up playing soccer, running was usually a form of punishment. I really enjoy running. But for a long time, it became drudgery because I was too focused on the outcome instead of just being in the moment. And what you should have said is, I missed the time at Chicago. Let's take a break, reassess, figure out, do the lessons learned, figure that out for the next one next year. Because it really took me a while to kind of come back to find my joy for running again. Yeah. And so that one really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. I'm noticing a trend or a theme between both of your stories, and thanks for sharing and going first, is that focus on the outcome, on something that truly has not happened yet, as being our benchmark of what we're comparing ourselves to as good or bad, as enough or not enough. And, the one thing that comes to mind when I think about this question is, in a similar way, when I was racing, when I started my professional triathlon career, I was so focused on comparing myself to other people and using them as my benchmark as what was good enough. Even though I always used to say the only thing I had in common with my competitors was that start line, that we were all in the same place at the same time on the start line. Everything else was completely different about where we lived, how we trained, everything else we had going on in our life. And I spent probably the first 2 to 2.5, if not 3 years of my professional racing career as truly never celebrating my wins. I would cross a finish line and I would just be like, well, 4th place is in 3rd place, 3rd place is in 2nd place. Well, just always looking ahead and never taking time to truly recognize the work that I had put in and where I was. I was always just comparing myself against what I wasn't instead of what I was, over and over and over. And what do you think that did for my satisfaction? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I never felt like any race was good enough. I was so focused on, okay, got to get back to train. Got to, this is what I got to work on. And that's not to say you can't take learning lessons from races or things you invest in. But, I recently moved, and it was like striking to me as I was unpacking some of the trophies that I've kept. I was like, wait a second, I was actually kind of good at this. And I never took time to even celebrate myself. Literally, this is going to sound extreme, but like for a day, for a week, to just say, hey, I poured into myself and something I really care about for months. And this is the fruit of my labor. I always looked at it as, I got to work harder. I got to get back. I got to work more. And that's something that, is really an anchor in my mind, because that comparison trap and not taking time to celebrate the win, whatever it is, right? It can be a work meeting. It can be a proposal. It can be an athletic accomplishment. It can be a relationship milestone. That it makes me sad for myself, and I'm just very conscious of doing that for the people that I work with and for other people, because that's something I could have changed, and I didn't.
It's interesting you say that, because for me, I think that's part of like the longevity of sport, because people will ask, years, been doing it a long time, the longevity, it's the love of it and celebrating. Where I think people get caught up on that same thing, Holly, is how do you help people? I'm almost jealous of people. I'm always a little jealous of people who are new to the sport or they're stepping up to a new distance. It's one of the reasons I love working with people, because the bar is so low. Like I tell people their first Ironman, if you want to do Ironman, is the easiest one. And they're like, no way. And you're like, you just want to finish and not croak, right? Like the bar is really low. as you see it with aging, like me, I'll never see a PR again. And so how do people stay motivated and celebrate a win? Because in theory, like you mentioned, Michael, it's a PR or a goal or something. And like aligning that goal with like, I like the, we're all the same at the start line, Holly. You know, you're the only one at the start line, your age, with this work thing, with this thing going on in life, with this, like, it's a race of one. And how do you celebrate that at the end? Because it is hard, I think, the longer you've been in sport, to be like, I'm getting slower, it's not faster. How do I compare? People are chasing PRs all the time. That's why I think some races have, you know, downhill swims, flat bikes, you know, downhill runs. Because I think there's a little bit of that mentality that people feel this inordinate pressure to do a PR rather than tackle a really hard course and be like, I was in such great shape, I did that. The times, like, no one's going to care. But again, I think it's that sharing and like celebrating yourself and being like, I was pretty freaking fit, like, compared to where I was. That's such a good point of like taking time out to celebrate, you know, like that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a bias in our culture though against celebrating to some extent. Either we think you have to hit the grand slam, the walk-off homer, or it's not worth celebrating. And I once had one of my bosses used to say, you know, you can score a lot of runs hitting singles, so celebrate the singles.
Well, I think there's this gap, actually. I think there's a gap, Michael, between people who do like their first marathon, their first half marathon. Like, you see them so excited, but once you're in the sport and like you have your cohort of people. So like I would joke, I'm the oldest dude I train with, right? Which doesn't mean, but I am the slowest one, right? And so that becomes your comparison group, to your point, Michael. So you feel like you don't want to celebrate when you finish because you're like, I'm the slowest one. And I get jealous and excited for people when they finish their first 5K. So I see people celebrating properly, and then I think they lose that because of who they're with, right? I joined a running group, and now I've got people in the running group dropping, 15-minute 5Ks, so I shouldn't celebrate that I ran a 2-minute PR, which is insane in a 5K, right? Like, I shouldn't celebrate that because I'm 4 minutes slower than this other person. You're like, no, celebrate that. So I do think there's this thing of like, how do you celebrate your singles and everything else? And your singles are in your ballpark to kind of put those two together.
Exactly.
With Holly. Like, so I do think there's this gap. The more you get into it, the more whatever, you can fall into the trap. Like Holly's saying, like, I'm sure how fast you were at the time. Like, if you talk to most people, they're like, oh my God, like, that's this. But in your cohort, you're always trying to be better.
That's right. Like that. And Michael and I will say, like, zooming in and zooming out, and how sometimes zooming out of your context, your environment, your immediate experience can be that contrast that can give us that perspective and that reframe opportunity that can help us see things differently. And I'm curious, how do you see this maybe show up at work or in a business context?
I think it's very similar. I mean, even though I don't have to do the 9 to 5 anymore. In working with people who are still in the corporate world, I think that bias towards it needs to be a product launch or a new version of the app or whatever is the only thing we're going to celebrate versus, and in the early days, back when we were launching like the first mobile app for our mail order pharmacy, like it didn't exist. And then we launched an app and you're like, that's huge. And then after that, it was just tweak. And how do you find the satisfaction and the glory there? But you have to, and you just find different things to celebrate. It could be that, for the techie people that are going to listen to this, all the test cases passed, or even little things that got uploaded to the Apple Store flawlessly. So you just have to find different things to measure success when you get into that situation. But I mean, it could be as simple as you nailed a presentation. Spend a few minutes just, basking in that, and then put it on your list of things you did that year, and then you can move on to it. But take the time to truly sit in it.
Yeah, it's interesting because in corporate, which I'm still in, right? You know, life's in months and quarters, right? And then year end. And, you know, even if you celebrate for a second, like you're off to the next quarter's goals, right? And so the world, I think, in the corporate world in particular, doesn't really want you to celebrate, and in some level they want you to like keep aspiring. To your point, almost, you know, the analogy how I'd being like you were great, you were third, like, but you could be second next quarter, like, it's like instantly, you know, you're off to, you know. And so I do think taking those small wins and doing those things is really key, and I think that's where the balance comes into too. Like, you go celebrate it if the company doesn't want to do it. You go take a run, a ride, or go take some thinking time somewhere and take a celebration, or however you want to do that, you know, and take that W.
Yeah, I think that's so important when it comes to sustainability, because we see that in sport, it's generous almost. Like, we can find races, you know, we can have good training days, but we can find races like cycling, you know, in the summer, in season, you can be racing every weekend. So you have opportunities. A race goes bad, you have next weekend, right around the corner. In work, you can work for a year or more to, like, air quotes, cross your finish line. So, like, how can we find more of those opportunities to recognize where performance is happening at work? I think that's an opportunity, because we're not just robots. That's why burnout is, you know, I want to say an epidemic, because people can't just have the goalposts moved and moved and moved and not be recognized or rewarded.
Yeah, similarly, and I don't think this was your original question, but, you know, what we've seen, and we really, as we were starting Metta, saw this gap of, you know, if you hired an athletic coach, they really only dealt with you in that context. And so the training plan often didn't care that you had this high demanding job or this high demanding home life. Similarly, if you work with an executive coach, they didn't necessarily care that you were trying to run your first marathon. And so what we've talked a lot about amongst ourselves is could you bring periodization, which is an athletic concept, to the workplace, such that, you know, what typically happens, definitely when I was still working, was as soon as you were done with project A, you were starting project B, and sometimes starting project B before you were done with A. And there was no time. We would hold a lessons learned, but it was really just, you know, a ceremony, check, file the documents on the cloud, and move on to the next thing, versus how in a business context could you say, this project you're going to be on is going to be 3 months long, and then you're going to get 2 weeks of go do some creative time, and so there are companies that do this, but that's, you know, in the athletics context, that recovery week is when your body's growing, when you're adapting to the stress that you've got, when you're learning. But we don't allow for that type of recovery in the business context. It's just keep moving. If
anything, you're a high performer at work, you know, like, you're going to get piled on, right? And so
your reward is
how do you manage that? How do you know? And that's where that thing is, you know, being able to do it. I really like, actually, Michael, how do you have a periodization plan at work? Because, you know, it's funny, even people who don't do anything athletic, like, kind of understand. Like,
yes.
I ran a marathon, I did something, you're not going to be out running, because, you know, if they don't understand, they're like, what do you take, a month or two off? And you're like, you know, I won't physically go crazy, I'll mentally go crazy if I don't do something. But everybody seems to get that, like, whether they are an athlete or not. But in the corporate world, like, they don't, because it's not a physical recovery. But those of us, you know, if you've done long races or even short races where you really go into the well, I tell people it's a lot of times, if you have a really good race, physically are really good, you mentally go to the well, as I will call it. Like, I need more mental time to recover. Like, do I want to do that? Like, am I willing to do that to myself again? Or when will I be willing to do that to myself again? Physically, I'll be fine much sooner than I am, like, that's especially, you know, longer stuff. And then how does that affect you at home? Because you're like a little, you know, you get out of your routine, you build up these routines. And so it is, how do you tie all this together to be like a well person, like overall, because all that stuff's going on. And your point, Michael, work doesn't care actually. Like if you just had if that project has a deadline, and if your race season isn't aligned or you're not aligning all that stuff together, like all of a sudden you end up with all of it crashing down at one point.
Exactly. And this is all about the stress and rest balance. And, we know from science, from research, that it's not about the duration of your rest. So I'm thinking like 2-week vacation. It's about the frequency of your rest. So it's better to take a long weekend, a 4-day weekend every quarter than it is to have a 2-week long vacation once a year. But in our culture, people will work and work and work to quote unquote earn that 2-week vacation. And it's not that rest isn't even enough to scratch the surface and restore that stress rest balance. So that's why I'm so excited to have these conversations, continuing conversations amongst ourselves and the clients and individuals that we bring onto the podcast to really share how they maintain this balance, because we know that's where performance and vitality and sustainable high performance really comes from. It's people that have been able to either learn the hard way or, they're able to share lessons and what works best for them so that, we can get more out of life and have fun and feel effective and celebrate the wins and not wait until we're just so broken down that, it's past us in the rear view, or we're so focused on an outcome that we sacrifice ourselves in the process.
And so I'm the least educated one on here. I'll just boil that whole thing down you just said to how do I be happy? Like, how do we be happy while I'm doing this stuff, right? Like the simplistic version of like, I can do these things and be happy, because those two can both be true as you go through stuff. And I think that's where people, don't always have the opportunity, is to achieve things and be happy along that path.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I'm more of a simpleton. I just want people to be happy and get stuff done. Get the science, I do kind of want that science though. You have to send the science on the like 2 weeks versus multiple 4 weeks. But yeah, just that really just be happy, be well person thing is so key.
Very meta.
Yeah.
Loving kindness.
Very meta.
Yeah.
Right.
Key. How can we be in the here and now, not stuck in the past or fixated on the future because it's just an idea?
Very true.
Awesome. So I know, we're kind of running here as we go. So a couple of things as we go. Like as I mentioned before, we'll have a bunch of guests coming for people that are listening. Format will be probably not all three of us all the time. We'll probably jam out every so often and have multiple guests on based on who people know where we line up. Like I said, I'm at least want to make sure I'm in on the Seiler family. Because I actually want the behind the scenes. It worked great because was racing in Europe. I want to know the when it didn't go great stories, because it looks great on the outside. Because I imagine there's a few.
We've got a few of those.
Yeah, and then we'll have several guests, so we'll put that out there. If people have suggestions of people they would like, let us know, definitely happy to chat with people who are going through this journey. Tag us, follow us on Work Defined, on your app of choice, Spotify, Apple, etc. And you can hit me up at Sean@MettaPerformance.com, or just go to MettaPerformance.com and flag us a note. As you can tell, any and all of us, Kate's on there as well, are happy to chat about this stuff any point in time. This is great. Just the beginning. And
yeah.
We did it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.